Hello everyone, and welcome in day 5 of WUDC and day 4 of the in rounds, which will be quite special day because this round will be the closed rounds. And when me and Hadar discussed the training program for this world, we're thinking what are the issues and the questions which people are raising in the particular groups, what are the discussions, and how to try to help people maybe listen to some perspective or some useful tips, not necessarily only read the comments on serious posting. So we decided to invite some of the people who write the guide about how to handle the stress, who are also usually very supportive and also giving a lot of support and back to the community. For now, starting, we will have Hadar, Juanita, Jess, and Nolutando. We hope that in the meantime will join us Lucia and Bobbi. And unfortunately, we will not have Enting today, but we hope that we will still cover lots of material. And Jess, who was also co-author of the guide about handling with the stress, we think that will fit for this. So how we will gonna do this? We will start with some positive aspect, and we will let you know our panelists a little bit better. So everyone will share the story, which can be some positive story, how they overcome the stress at Worlds or at other competition or not related to debating. And I think we should start with one of the story, which is called the biggest comeback of the century, which usually the friends of Hadar Goldberg know very well. But for the first time, she will have an audience on the platform to give some sort of insight from how the road to being ESL champion in Thailand worked, and how that wasn't only debating in the final and winning and getting the trophy, but what's happened before, specifically in the very first day when we were spending a lot of time sitting in the stairs and chatting. So I will give a floor to Hadar to start and tell you one of the funniest story and one of the most inspiring story, which I think everyone should listen. So Hadar, you have your 5 minutes.
Yeah, comeback of the century, no pressure. Look, I think the details I've already published probably in the post already, but for anyone who doesn't know, Worlds for me was a bit of a roller coaster. We started finishing day 1 after 3 rounds on 3 points. And we ended up breaking on 20 points and making ESL championships, and also most of the points were accumulated on day 3. So on the closed rounds, we had 8 more points on day 2 and then 9 more points on day 3. So all through this, we were not certain at any point what's going to happen to us. After day 1, we were quite certain that we might actually not break at all. And that was a fun time to handle. I think Klaudia was there to manage many of my tears. So I think some things that are in hindsight, I learned from this, and I see this as a good thing, by the way, in hindsight. In hindsight, I think this is one of my proudest achievements, not because of winning at the end, but because of going through the pressure through it. And I think I've learned a lot through the process of how to handle this. So I'll try to maybe make this applicable to some of you as well. The first thing I will say, which I think often goes neglected when we discuss how to manage stress, is don't forget that this is a teamwork. This is important because your partner is in all likelihood going through a very similar situation right now. And it's important, despite it being our initial tendency to be selfish about it. And I'm the first person to promote yeah, be selfish. It's fine to focus on your own mental health at the moment, not to want to be there currently for maybe not wanting to be with the rest of your society or go to socials or whatever. It's not the mood. You don't owe anyone anything except for your partner. This is a team game. To succeed in this, you need to succeed together. And it's very important that you also check up on them, that you stay in constant communication to see that you're going through this together, because I think you're also going to be each other's biggest support. Eventually, you're the ones who are most caring about the situation. You know best what happened to you. You're most likely to, not quote unquote gaslight you about this, because I know many people, if you say that you feel like the call was unjust or whatever, maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong, irrelevant, to be honest. I think sometimes we can be salty, and it's fine to be salty when bad things happen to us. But many people will say things that you might not want to hear at the moment. Oh, you need to win every judge, and you need to and try to understand all the different perspectives, which is true, I think, by the way, in training. And I'm a very strong provoker of trying to win every judge and trying to understand different calls and perspectives in the entire training process. At the moment, it might not be the thing that you want to focus on, but your partner will understand you. Your partner will agree with you on most things. Your partner will be there. And I think spending time with them and understanding their struggles as well is super important. The other thing that I will say that I think I've learned from this is also have a very clear idea of your personal like needs and what helps you and what harms you. So this could be things like, if there are people that I need to talk to, make sure that they are available to you. If there are people that you need to not talk to, that's also fine. You don't need to be rude about this. You can just say, I need some space, that's fine. But I think often we have a lot of expectations from ourselves. I think this is a very common problem, especially for women and gender minorities, that we feel like we need to always be polite to everyone and always friendly to everyone and put ourselves as less priority and whatever. And I think during Worlds, when you're stressed, it is fine to put yourself first. And for this, I would say, if you know that some activities might not do well for you, some conversations might not do well for you, avoid them. You don't owe anyone to go to, like, I don't know if your like societies do a social gathering at the nights, but if you feel like it will harm you, don't do that. If hearing about how other people succeed makes you feel shit, you can say that. You don't need to say that you are salty about this. Again, be polite, but you can say, hi, I'm a bit not in the mood today to talk about how people are doing. I'm going to leave the group chat for now, but I'm very wishing everyone best of luck. So make your own preferences, understand them, make them clear to others in a polite manner. People will get it. People will understand where you're coming from. I think that is also important. And I think other than that, which is like something that, well, maybe my story is an exception here, but I think it is worthwhile to remember, things change a lot. You're not dead. Like, in all likelihood, most teams by now are still very much alive for break. And it might feel bad temporarily because you are on less points than you have expected. But the nature of the game, especially in competitions such as Worlds, which has so many rounds, things change so much. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. I know it's a cliche, but it's true. The likelihood is, if you are on less points that you think represent your skills, then it means that you're also going to see weaker rooms. Then is probably something that you can win. So likely you're going to gather more points as a result of this. Usually the later days also have like because there is a lot of feedback accumulated on all judges and data for CAs to work with, there's also like often like better allocations, and you're likely to get like right calls and everything. Things change a lot. Also, there's a fluctuation of themes. So, you know, it's possible that you've got through themes that are bad for you, like you're not good in this kind of motion or another kind of motion. Probably this kind of motion won't repeat, and now you'll get one that is better for you. Things change so much. So just like, don't think necessarily that the past represents what's going to happen now. I think also because of the nature of like power pairing and how it works, there's also a very traditional trajectory with most people that day two for many teams is going to usually be the hardest day. Like usually the teams that are like thinking that they are likely to break are going to have like a lot of points accumulated on day one, then reach very hard rooms on day two, which might lead them to have lower points, and then fix for this again in day three. So it is a roller coaster, it's a marathon. It feels stressful. I won't say that it's not. I don't think that there are ways to not be stressed. I think I would be lying if I would say that I was not stressed or a complete wreck during Worlds. The point isn't about how to not feel your feelings. Feel your feelings. The point is how to manage them. Like, go through them. Remember that your feelings are currently telling you the worst case scenario because of anxiety, and it's not necessarily the likely scenario. Be with friends, have your coping mechanisms, and just remember that the reality is not always the voice in your head.
Okay, as we heard, Hadar also adds some sort of reassuring words already for like how to handle with today. And now we would like to hear maybe Nalo, what is your successful story, how to dealing with stress or like coping mechanism, or what are you proud of? So yeah, now the floor is yours.
Cool. Yeah, that question is a bit much considering the fact that I often am a stress ball. But for the most part, I think one of the most important things that I've been able to pick up in the last 2-3 years is that every stressful situation is often because there's some degree of value that's attached to it. And because of the degree of value that's attached to it, often the mind plays tricks on you to try and kind of just move you away from getting to that kind of disappointment that's likely going to be attached to that. So one of the first things that I would want to bring up is, I think the application for Belgrade DCA was the most stressful thing I've ever had to do when it comes to debating, because firstly, the application, I got it on the day that it was due, I think. That's the day I actually bumped into the application. And I was already going through the most in terms of imposter syndrome, because I was feeling all types of way about whether or not I would actually be able to make the fold, just the short list before we even get to like DCA. Because one, I hadn't had much experience outside of my own circuit. And two, the little that I did have outside of my own circuit was probably not going to be enough to suffice for somebody to be DCA of Worlds. Come on, this is like the biggest stage of them all. So I have this DCA application. I have 3-4 people telling me you need to apply. And my mind is telling me that there's probably no way, no chance that you're going to be able to do this, especially because I didn't break at Worlds 2019. Yeah, major confidence knock. So I eventually get to starting this application. And by the time you get to the end of having to do the list of things that you've accomplished in debating, you start questioning whether or not those accomplishments are good enough to be able to get you to a point where you could even be a consideration to this. And I think one of the things that I then had to do, and I had to start like really questioning, was one, what is it that ultimately determines whether or not an individual is worthy of being on that kind of set of people? But secondly, I also had to come to terms with the idea that much of what happens in terms of things like selections and whatnot is also a game of chance. So what often happens is that the things that I find to be of importance and to be valuable, things like whether or not somebody has won Worlds before, is probably not going to be the most important thing when it comes to what it is that the team actually needs to be able to get a full team that works according to what is needed there. And that's something that I think a lot of people need to start making sense of, because what often happens is we think that because I'm not the best speaker or I'm not the best judge, it often means that I can't contribute to this space. And that's not always going to be the case. So things like motion setting also come into play when you're talking about cap situations. Things like understanding stress testing, for example, is important when you're going to be doing cap type things. Sometimes even just understanding how to put together certain initiatives that would allow you to be able to assist the kind of circuits that you exist within and outside of that are also things that are important in relation to that. And I had to become aware of that. And I had to become aware of the various contributing factors that would ultimately allow me to be able to fill in that application. Because I think it was only when I got to like some of the questions about what are the things that you think you'd want to shift here? What are the things that you would want to contribute on here and there? That I began to feel a little bit more confident about putting together that application, because it had moved past the things that I was most insecure about when it came to things like a CV, when it came to things like accomplishments in the debating space. Because I'd spent much of my debating time just kind of watching as opposed to actually being a part of it. And that's also because of like stage fright and various other things that I had to deal with. So that for me was big. The first thing that you need to understand is be self-aware and understand what makes you tick in terms of your anxieties. Then find something that is going to be able to mitigate that. So what is the alternative that is outside of that could still be a contributing factor to something being somewhat good? And then lastly, understanding that some things are just a game of chance. And because they're a game of chance, they can be successful, they might not be successful, but they can't be a measure of your self-worth as an individual. And that for me was one of the most important things in filling out just the application before we even got to the interviews and everything else. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nolo, for this. We hope that that will be also very inspiring for other people who might have imposter syndrome for like applying for big things and for any DCA ships. And now let's maybe move to Jessica, our TikTok queen, to tell us something about her coping mechanisms and how successful is she in this, or like what things make her happy and less stressed than usual. Okay, go, Jess.
I'll try to be somewhat brief. Basically, like my, we'll call it story, is very simple. I was very happy. I broke 1 year at Worlds and I didn't break the following year. That was kind of a bummer. I cried a lot. I was very upset. But that happened, right? And that's a pretty like, you know, it felt like quite a shit trajectory, right? And I think the thing, and I guess the learning from that is the intensity of emotions that you feel around that does not last that long. Like it really doesn't. Like, yeah, sure, I was crying that night. The next few days at Worlds, I was pretty upset. I went home, I was still a little bit sad. And then maybe within a week, it was like completely back to normal, right? Like it was like, oh, it was just a competition, right? So I think just recognize that you're not, like in the worst case scenario, worst case scenario, things don't pan out the way you want. You're not going to feel like that forever. It'll feel really intense and shit at the time. That is, again, in the worst case scenario. That might not happen. You might get indeed all the success you want. So, but I think that's just worth keeping in mind, that this is like such a unique, stressful kind of experience that, you know, is, you know, once you kind of go back to the real world, it kind of all, you know, goes back to normal. My coping strategy is perhaps not one that everyone should employ, in the sense that if it's something that's going to make you feel more down, recognizing yourself and don't do it. But I personally like to think about what the worst case scenario will be and then just make peace with that, right? I tell myself, okay, the worst case scenario is I'm not going to break. How can I make peace with that? Okay, I'll make peace with that because it'll be fine. I'll have all the other opportunities. It's just debating. And then if anything happens to be better than that worst case scenario, I can only feel happy, if that makes sense. That doesn't work for everyone though, because some people, in thinking about the worst case scenario, get defeatist, etc. So if that's not going to work for you, don't do it. But if you can make peace with that worst possible circumstance, then anything better than that can only be a good thing, if that makes sense. And all the kind of usual stuff, like remind yourself that no one is analyzing your performance as much as you are analyzing your performance. Like you think everyone's like pouring through the tab, and yeah, people do see results, right? That's inevitable. But no one is like reading through exactly your trajectory as much as you are. People are focused on themselves because people are narcissists. So, you know, you don't need to worry about that, okay? And my kind of other final thought is just that one thing that really helped me is to try to get really invested in other people. If I'm not confining like what is a success story to my own trajectory, and if I think about success for people that I really like and my friends, then success tends to be a little bit more broadened. So I guess you're kind of, what I'm trying to say is like, yeah, you can get joy about seeing other people. And that's really hard, right? Because we're always comparing ourselves to other people. So it's really hard to like celebrate a friend's victory if you're the person that didn't break yourself. But if you can kind of conceptualize closed rounds around, all right, it's not just about me, and try to get really invested in some, you know, your other friends, then at least you'll probably, worst case scenario again, hopefully at least one of you does, you know, meets your expectations, and you'll be able to kind of channel your joy and your happiness into that. So those are kind of my slightly different takes, but I think everyone's kind of coping mechanisms so far are definitely really good things to keep in mind. So, but if you're a slightly more pessimistic person like me, think about the worst case scenario, make a peace with it. Sometimes can be the most helpful thing, and it can only get better. So.
Okay, thanks, Jess. So now it's time for Juanita, which for me personally is like my EFL sister in the debating community. And I think it's really cool to have someone who can like share the same stress thoughts, specifically in clear debating. So I think now it's time for her to also speak about her experience.
Well, I would say first that I do feel most of the things that have been flagged before. And I do sympathize a lot with Hadar, because the most important thing I do when I deal with stress is first being aware of what is it that I need and what is it that my partner needs. It is really important for you to understand what the other person needs and how to cater to that interest, not only because it is likely that you're going to be more successful if you're empathetic to your partner, but because your partner is someone that does a lot of things with you. It is likely they are your friends. It is likely that they have done a lot of sacrifices for you. Like, this is an important person in your life, and you should be able to make adjustments for them to feel okay. So I think it's really important always having a chat in terms of what is it that I can do to help you out in this situation. And it is really important to understand that people deal with stress differently. I need to talk. I need to always go through scenarios. As Jess was saying, I am going to look, this is the best case, this is the worst case. Why is it that we're in this case or that case? I need to rant a lot. And I know Jorge, my partner, is not good with ranting. Like, he needs to go and watch tennis, or he needs to go and play his games or listen to music. So I know I cannot rant to Jorge. And that is not because Jorge doesn't care, but it is because it makes it worse for him. So I need to find someone I can rant to. And it is something that I have to deal with from the start of the tournament, because I cannot look for someone to rant to when I need to rant. This person needs to be aware that I'm going to rant eventually. So that kind of preemption to have your, like, to have it's raining. I don't know if you can hear it, but it's okay. Like, having that support system built up before, it's really important so that you can sort this out. But the second thing I would say is adjusting to expectations. Like, I know that we always think we can do better, and it is most likely that we always can do better. But if we do not, if we're not meeting the expectations we had to begin with, it's okay. That is not probably reflective of the fact that you're not capable, but it's probably reflective that you probably did not have a good day, or like a lot of external factors play into like your success story. If you had a pull up, if you have a pull down, if you had emotion that you didn't know about and were OG, whatever, like, you cannot control a lot of stuff. And it is oftentimes good to adjust your expectations. And I want to be like really clear in terms of adjusting expectations. For example, like, when you're breaking EFL, it is often needed to do 5 points per day. Like, you do 5 points the first one, 5 points the second one, and you're good to go. Because if you do 5, 5, 5, you're breaking at 15, it is going to be fine. Well, in my first Worlds, I was in 5, 5, and then I needed to do 5. It went well, but then in my next 2 Worlds, I was over it. So I didn't want just EFL, I wanted to go higher. And it was never possible. But it's okay. Like, the fact that I was able to be over 5 in some days and go +2 in the last one, it's a big achievement. Yeah, I wish I was able to do more, probably. If I was capable of doing more or not, a mystery. It's not good to deal on mysteries or what ifs, but that in and of itself is a good achievement, and adjusting expectations to that is okay. And that's the last thing I would say with dealing with stress. I think the optics of failure are askew when you're the ones assessing it. Because what is a failure for me as Juanita is seen as a success for a lot of people. Like, I have lost 3 EFL finals. And for me, it's a loss, because how come you get to 3 and you don't win any of them? Like, what's wrong with you, right? but that's the optics of failure for me. Like for other people, you're making it to 3 in a row. So that is a huge success. So understanding the optics of failure and not beating yourself up because of those optics is oftentimes not only something that is healthy, but something that should be adequate because it is rewarding yourself for the effort you have done. So I would say be really aware of the optics of failure. Like be often aware that what seems to be a failure for you is something that you never thought possible. Like if you ask Juanita in 2017 if she was going to be a 3-time EFL finalist, well, Juanita would have laughed at you. Like it was not possible. Someone from Colombia had never broken at Worlds. When I was trained for Mexico, I was told like, you're going to learn a lot, you're not going to break. And I made it to finals. So like understanding first that success is a spectrum and therefore what you see as a failure might not be so. And second, that the things you're achieving now, like, yes, they seem within grasp now, and you see within grasp better things than what you're achieving, probably you can achieve more. But that doesn't mean where you are is a bad thing or is something that is not worth rewarding yourself for. So I would say understanding that you are better than what you ever thought you could do is something that is often healthy and fair for you to do. That's my take on success and my take on stress and how to deal with it.
Okay, thank you so much, Juanita. I will add just 2 things and then I will pass to Bobbi. So firstly, check-in is open. So if you're watching this stream, if you're not checked in yet, please do so. It's on the check-in channel. Please put the green button. The second thing, I just want to follow up to what Juanita said about the expectation and success. So at Thailand, it was very stressful for me because that was my first Worlds in my life when I was speaking. And I had a very terrible run at Euros when I ended up on 9 points and day 2 on 8. So I was like the day 3 was like killer day for me. The speaker tab was just terrible. So I barely cried when I saw this during the championship dinner. And when we came to Thailand, me and my partner didn't break at 3 pre-competitions, but I broke with other people. And that was just like very frustrating. He missed the flight to Oxford IB, so we didn't speak there. So it was a lot of obstacles. And somehow we ended up on straight on 12 points after day 2 as an EFL team. And I think the biggest issue what happened, everyone was so hyped for us. Like, oh my God, you will break open, your life open, you can do ESL. And Polish team never broke ESL or never broke open at Worlds and was always close. So I think it was just like pumping us so much and putting some sort of pressure that we are doing so well unexpected and we can just push forward. And I'm not sure if we were mentally like aware of this. So the night before the closed rounds, I didn't sleep and the whole day 3 was super stressful because I was no longer wanted to break at all because I wanted to break open because people assuring me that I can do this. And I think sometimes when you are supporting your friends, you also need to check what are their expectations. Because I think in the end it was very cool when some of the people hugged me on the break night and they didn't said congratulations, but they said like, I'm sorry because I know that you wanted more after like the good run. And I think it's also good to recognize that sometimes even if people collecting the points, that might not be something which is satisfactory for them. So be aware when you're talking to your friends or asking them or sending them messages that you are doing this in a good way. So I wanted to add this. And now we will have Bobbi from the CA team. And now we are switching directly to talk about the closed rounds. And we also gave some more focus on judges as well, because we mostly talk now about the speakers, but we have also a very important group of people at this competition. And I will pass the floor to Bobbi to give us some sort of words from the side of the CA team and from her.
Hi, everyone. So yeah, close rounds coming up. And I know that these are very, very stressful. I know that the temptation, this is what I did every single time I spoke. So at Worlds, so very well, this is very hypocritical. The temptation is to back tab, to try and work out how many points everyone else was on going into your room. if you're a judge is likely to break, so are you live, and trying to very much work out where you end up. And while I know that nothing that anyone could have said to me would have stopped me doing that at the time, I think that as other panelists have mentioned, a lot goes into it that makes it difficult to judge. You pull up, people get pulled up, people get pulled down. We test chairs so that, a chair that you might not have heard of before, who have been getting really, really good feedback, so that we know on our end who really strong might be chairing your room, but they're not what you perceive as a massive name. There are many, many things which go into the way a closed panel and a closed room look like. And so please, I know from experience how challenging this is, and I was always trying to work out how we did, but it can be very genuinely difficult to work out your positions or your standings from the teams and the judges that are in your rooms. And so I think that in terms of from the organizational side, trying not to read too much into where you end up getting placed, it would be, I know it's hard to do, but would be very, very helpful. And from the judges side, I know that even actually when I judged, I often worried about, chairs not liking me, particularly when I was a very, very new judge and I didn't feel that people knew who I am, writing a couple of pieces of negative feedback and really tanking my judge score meaning that I was never going to break. And one thing that I can assure you is that while we do take judge feedback incredibly seriously and we read through every single piece of that at the end of every day, we look at it holistically, we look at all of the feedback you get. And it's often obvious when someone's gotten a string of great feedback and then gets one incredibly negative one that, rather than being a reflection of their abilities or how well they do things, that, they did not get on with their chair or their panelists, that something happened during the round, which meant that these two particular people didn't get on and didn't enjoy each other's style of judging. And so if you're a judge, I promise you that if you had a difficult round, if you feel like your chair didn't like you, if you were still a good judge, it is quite apparent that happened. And so please don't let one round of judge feedback that you feel wasn't going to go well contribute to an overriding anxiety that you aren't going to break, that it's going to be very difficult, because from our end we can tell. On the flip side, if you feel like you're someone who didn't come into this tournament with a huge amount of experience, if you're getting great feedback, we do notice that too. We do take account of that too. 9 rounds is a long time, that's a lot of data points. And so over the course of that, I think it does make it easier to develop a really holistic sense of where people are and how people are doing. The other thing, so I think that, again, try not to let a couple of rounds that you feel were difficult mean that you feel as that breaking can ever happen. On the flip side of that, it is just as in the ESL, EPL, Open, EFL breaks for speaking, it is a competitive judge break. And not only is it competitive because there are lots of good judges, but it's competitive because there are lots of other factors that when we're breaking judges, we have to take into account. That is gender diversity, regional diversity. Some people are fantastic panelists, but work better as a panelist on a chair. Some people are fantastic chairs, but they have a lot of institutional clashes in the higher rounds for whatever reason, which means it's hard to place them. There are many, many things that go into determining a judge break, which is competitive as it is, that have very, very little to do with you and your abilities. And so, there are many, many more people we wish we could break than we can. And the reasons that we do or don't end up, or reasons that we don't end up breaking some people often has to do with the way that we're trying to compose panels and with the way we're trying to put things together in the out rounds. So please, again, I do not think that this is a very, very competitive break. It's a very hard one, and there are many, many considerations. And then, luck happens, and, randomness happens. And so please, from the organizational side, it is obvious that, this sort of thing there are many, many wonderful judges, and a break or not break at Worlds does not mean you're any less of a wonderful judge. I know it doesn't feel like that. And when I didn't break at Worlds, I felt it was a huge reflection on me and a huge reflection on my abilities. But from the organizational side, it's just very apparent it's not true. And the one other thing I'd say for, both closed rounds and for judging is that every debater, if you have done this long enough, has had moments where they've gotten really, really unlucky. And that's a close call went against you, a not close call that you feel was quite obviously for you went against you. For whatever reason, you had 2 chairs in a row that you really did disagree with or didn't like. And so not only do I think the previous panelists were right that no one is thinking about you as much as you're thinking about you, but I think everyone who is reasonable who's done this activity knows that there was a great degree of randomness that goes into it, and so understands that really good teams and phenomenal judges get a bit unlucky sometimes. And so I think that most people know that, you know, if this doesn't go well, there are other opportunities, but also that this not going well does not have to be a reflection on whether or not you are not phenomenally talented at what you do. And from our side, it is really obvious how many talented people there are at this competition. And we do everything we can to make sure that we give everyone every opportunity to display that talent, and are careful and mindful about evaluating the piece of information that we get and take them all with a pinch of salt, with an understanding. You know, if a judge has phenomenal feedback and then gets a 4 and gets very low scores from the team they took the 4th to, while that is still valuable feedback, there are obviously other dynamics at play there, and so we do everything we can on our side to make sure it's a holistic evaluation, that we're looking at all the information that we have.
Okay, thank you, Bobbi, so much. We think that there were many people who wanted to hear this, who needed to hear some sort of word from CA team, and we think that you are definitely the people who will do the fair job. And thank you so much for jumping in despite being extremely busy with dealing with everything and organizing. We really appreciate this. I think now it's the important question, because these are the unprecedented worlds where there is a day break between round 8 and round 9, which didn't happen before, but also at any other online competition that wasn't that important, that you are finishing the day and the next round have such a stakes. Do you have any advices, like I will ask my panelists one by one, or ideas how people should spend the time today, or like what sort of things to do? Because I can say from my perspective, it's neither depends if you have friends around you or if you are capable to go to Zoom, to chat, to play Scribble, or like to play any online game, to like go to listen to some music together or exchange some sort of stories. This is definitely helpful because it didn't keep you focused on this rush and didn't keep you focused so stressed. Even if they are debaters, even if you will be discussing some sort of rounds or runs, this is still something that you feel comfortable because you know that everyone else has similar fears or similar thoughts, but you still can enjoy this time together. So that would be from me probably, that try to call someone or try to go out if it's possible, if it's in close proximity. But yeah, I will pass now, maybe starting with Hadar and then in the similar order as we did before.
So just to make sure that I understand the question well, the question right now is like, what are the coping mechanisms that we find helpful in those times for us?
Yeah, but specifically like when you have a whole day before round 9 for this online setting and for this world specifically.
Awesome. Well, I think obviously like the thing will need to be very personal. I'm not going to lie. I'm one of the people that like in order to focus well before a round needs a bit of cancer. I'm sure some of you as well. I'm sure others not. I'm not going to promote this for anyone else. I think there are other things that are like useful for me, like music was always very helpful. I was the kind that needed like inspirational music. I think for me, I keep the Set Go playlist for other times during these times. I need to feel like good. I'm also very basic, so my most casual is just How Far I'll Go from Moana, and I would hear it in loops before every round. But yeah, these are like the classic material things that are very, it sounds very shallow in a way, but because like it's very extraneous, it's like, oh, cigarettes, music. But I think this is important to know that often the simplest things to do, even if not the biggest things to do, are things that don't require you to go through the entire introspective process, but just have something that you know that is a mood lifter, easy and accessible. For some people, it's food. For some people, it's a call with a certain person. For some people, it's music. Find what it is for you and have that. I think something else that helped me is also identifying the right people to talk to. I think I very much identify with what Juanita said about like renting and have a partner that doesn't want to rent. It was very much the dynamics with Maya and myself. I was the person who after every round needed to go through everything that was said, what we could have done better, what happened in the round, how we would do it the next time and whatever. And Maya just needed space after every round when we talked in Worlds. And I think the thing that for that is well also identify who are the people that you have to approach. So map in advance who are the kind of people that you want to talk to and that are probably sharing with you what you need at this moment. And some people need one thing, some people need another thing. I think, by the way, my hot take on backstabbing is pretty much the same method. Like for some people it's bad, for some people it's good. I agree with Bobbi that probably for most people it's more harm than good because it's stressful. For me personally, because I did it as well, I know. When I didn't backstab, I would imagine the worst. I know that this would happen to me. I would just imagine, oh, I'm certainly forthing unless I reassured myself through backstabbing that I didn't. And if you're like that, maybe it is good for you. If you aren't, then don't do that. And maybe get out of friends groups that do that and don't get exposed to this by proxy, etc. So I think the biggest thing to be said about this is just like, it's super personal and it's important to map what causes your ups and downs, both in the shallow matters of just external things and in the deep manner of debate-related things, introspection-related things, etc.
Okay, let's move now. Nolo, what's your plan for today after round 8? And also, what would be your plan if you will be speaking at this competition? How would you copy after the rounds?
Ooh, yeah, no. It's probably a major reason why I hardly ever speak at majors, and that's because I just can't deal with that kind of stress. Mostly because I kind of like the idea of having some degree of control in terms of knowing what's happening, especially with closed rounds. So I think one of the things that I would suggest, though, even though that's something that I probably will not be doing, is one, try and get some rest. I think a lot of people try to stress about what could potentially be the round 9 motion. How could you potentially intensely train for something like that? You can't guess the round 9 motion unless somebody on the CA team decides to give it to you, and that's unlikely. It's just not going to happen. So it's fine. It's okay for you to not preempt what could potentially be the next thing that's going to come out. Because even when you look at the themes, chances are one of the themes that you think hasn't come up will come up in like break rounds as opposed to the 9th round. So just leave it alone and just give yourself a chance to just regroup. This is a stressful time, often very tiring as well because of various other things. So when you're not taking the time to take care of yourself to replenish, you're not going to have the kind of like energy that you need for round 9, especially if it's something that's going to be stressful. For judges, I would say probably don't backstab. Probably don't try and figure out which rooms you're in, what scores people are on in the rooms that you're in, and what that potentially means for you in terms of breaking, because that's usually going to be where you get your most stress. And also just most of the time, it's just really just understanding that what you're doing is judging a tournament. You're judging a round, you're giving it your best. And ultimately, whether or not your take on the round is the one that ultimately becomes what is OA or is not, is something that you can't always control, and something is also something that is often based on things like the judging principle and view and idea of the space that different people come from and what that means in terms of the way in which they evaluate particular rooms. So don't take all of it too much to heart, but at the same time, just give yourself enough time and space to be able to rest out, and also just give yourself enough time to be able to just like chill out and relax. If you break, great. If you don't, next time.
Thank you very much, Nala. Now I think, Jess, do you want to tell us what are your plans for your probably night due to time zones? So
yeah, well, again, if you know, like Nolu, I recognize that I am a massive stressful, which is probably why I will never speak at another Worlds. So recognizing that is good. But I think, like, I won't add too much to what everyone's already said. I think sleep is great if you can get it. Some people just, you know, that's probably not going to happen. So try to do something maybe a bit relaxing, like if you can afford to do so, go get a massage or something. Go get your nails done. Go watch a movie. The new Black Widow is out. I'm probably going to go see that tomorrow. So something like that can just, like, as much as possible, fully take your mind away from that for that period of time. The other thing I would suggest is just try to eat something vaguely nutritious if you can. Try to eat a vegetable. I think it will really help at this point, because if your body is just like, only surviving on caffeine and sugar, then you're probably, any negative emotions you might feel will also coincide with a sugar crash or a caffeine crash. And those things compounded are probably not going to be good for you. So try to eat like foods that are going to burn off over a longer period of time. If you can, something low GI, something that has a degree of fiber, ideally, if you can, because your physical, body will also kind of, at the point that compounds with how you're feeling emotionally or mentally, that may be kind of a bad thing. So, and I guess my third and final thought is, whilst some people do well surrounded by other people, recognize that not everyone does. And if you're the type of person that needs your space, that is also okay. So like, great if you do well being around friends and their positive energy helps you, great. But if you recognize that you're not the sort of person that does well around other people and you just need a few hours by yourself, don't feel like a bad person if you have to say to people, I'm just going to go for a walk. I just need an hour by myself. I'm going to walk around the block and I'll come back and then we'll talk then, if you happen to be around people, for example. So everyone's different. It's totally valid if you're someone that falls into that. But do something relaxing, and for the love of God, eat a vegetable, is my kind of key takeaways.
Thank you, Jessica. We are very happy that at Masters you used the chicken nuggets example, and now we are hearing about vegetables. Takes change, depends on the context. So very happy to hear that. Juanita, do you have something to add on this? You are also in quite problematic time zone, as also many participants in this competition. So you can also tell something specifically to people who are not debating in the daily life and who have some different schedule for the last week.
Well, I would say the first thing on that is that it is important for you to try, even if your schedule is kind of different, to still sleep. Like, you're waking up at 2 a.m. It is not feasible to go to sleep at the usual times you go to sleep. Like going, and I am probably a hypocrite for saying this because I am not doing it, but like go to sleep earlier, like at 7 p.m. or go to sleep at 8 p.m. if you can do it. Like try to work through your stuff during the day so that you can go to sleep earlier. Do not go to sleep at the usual 11 p.m. you do because you're not getting enough sleep. This is likely something that is going to make you more edgy. And this means that it is likely going to make you more vulnerable to bad reactions, more vulnerable to bad feelings, to probably having issues with the people you're talking to. It is probably not good for them, not good for you. So as Jess said, like, if you can sleep, do sleep. The other thing I would say is that it works a lot for me to talk to people outside of the tournament. That being my friends who know about debating but are not in the tournament, or my friends outside. It works a lot for me to talk to my sister, for example, because she doesn't know much about debating, but she knows I care. So she just tries to make it fun for me, to distract me. And if I go to the same like loophole into I just want to talk about debating, she's likely going to say, I do not care about this, let's talk about something else. And that is often something that helps me a lot. Like being forced to not think about it is something that helps me. And maybe people outside are going to help you most with that, because it is likely that if you talk to people from debating, you're going to end up again in the loophole of debating. If you're good with backtabbing, do it, but do not treat it as a non-rebuttal like truth. You can be bad at backtabbing, you cannot be accurate, and therefore, even if you are sure you're in a dead room, like do your best and do not feel defeated. Like you have another round and do your best, even if it's a dead round in terms of how you did backtab. But like if you're going to do backtab, first be aware that not all people like backtabbing, so do not be like so open about it and so open about the things you find out. Like, for example, I have had experiences in which people tell me, I did backtabbing, you were in this room, and I'm like, no, thank you, not fun. So be aware of that. Like, if you're backtabbing, do not let other people know what you found out if they are not asking. Like, be mindful of that. And the second thing is be aware that backtabbing is not always accurate, so do not like take all your decisions based on those.
Yeah, before I will pass to Bobbi for the final remarks, I just want to add one more thing on the backtabbing and one more on the question which pop up in the sheet. So firstly, we are definitely not encouraging you to do this. The only reason why we are acknowledging that and giving you pro and cons, it's because we know that people will be doing that regardless, but please don't take this as any encouragement from our side. The second comment is, there was a question how people who are ESL or like EFL feel problematic in the EPL rooms. And that was the struggle which I also had, and I was quite terrified. However, you still know the basic words to prove on which points the other side is contingent, why the point doesn't stand, and what the team needs to prove. And you also can make the responses, regardless if you will not do this in the most flourish language. And if you don't believe it, I'm a perfect example for this, because my English grammar and my vocabulary is very, very poor, and I still managed to survive. But I just learned a way for being extremely, extremely direct, and even calling people out that this is something which we proved. And even if someone will use symmetric words, they still need to show some additional impact. You try to fight in the POIs. If you don't trust the judge will catch this out, try to point that out, but do that with respect. Like, don't just call the team, they EPL'd me, but said what you said, and then point out what the other team might repeat after you. So try to also not play on the biases that if they are like the team who is proficient in English, they will definitely be fully derivative out of you, but try to point out specifics. Same when you are asking in the judging panel, what do you think was the new point? You can say why there were similarities or why the end up goal was the same, but try to do this that way. And I think it takes time to overcome this syndrome. It takes time to become better in this, but this is definitely possible. And saying this person who jumped from the average of like 75 or 76 at Euros to 82 at recent competitions and beating the people who are proficient in English. So trust me, if I could do this, then everyone can. So that was the response to one of the questions from the panel. I think Hadar and Juanita would agree with me about and know how that things works. And also Jess and Bobbi, like the judges are aware of this. This is not something which we are not discussing. This is not something which we are not doing on judges workshops. So please try to be mindful and have some faith. And if you don't have this faith, try to help as best as you can and best in your abilities. And I will pass for the final remarks to Bobbi because we are finishing with the time. We know that Bobbi will not have relaxing time probably today because need to generate the break and need to deal with the CE work. But if you have any additional takes, any additional comments for us, we will be happy to take this for the end of this panel.
Yeah, I'll try not to take up too much time, but on the backtabbing question, just to address judges directly, like I just don't think you can. Remember that we have live rooms up and down the tournament, EFL, ESL, and EPL, and those we all take incredibly seriously. And so there will be rounds where, there might be a couple of EFL teams competing and they are on the bubble, and those might be points that are like a lower point rooms than for the EPL rate, but those are just as important. And if you've gotten great feedback from your ESL and your EFL teams that you've judged, that really matters to us, that we know we can give people really good judges that will respect them and like not judge based on like flowery language. And so there are live rooms up and down the tournament. Similarly, like if you are a really strong judge, there's a chair that we want to test, you might be winging that chair so that we can get feedback from you on them. There are 1,000 reasons why we put you in rooms that are going to be very, very different. 1,000 reasons why we put you in a chair on a wing that have very, very little to do with your judge ranking. And so I don't think you can backtab as a judge. And I think that is a good way to drive yourself crazy. I think the last thing I want to finish on is I'm speaking on behalf of Kat, of your comment of equity. Like we are here for you, and we really want to do everything we can to ensure a really great experience. So if you have questions, if you have concerns, if there's something we can help with, if you're worried about something, if you feel like someone has been unfair, that is what we're here for. Please come to us, please talk to us, please flag whatever your issues are. We will do our very, very best to help you with them. And I hope that, and while again, I think that not a lot, and I hope that that can be something that mitigates stress too, that if you think that you are being treated unfairly or that something is going wrong, or if you're worried about how we're thinking about things, please do reach out to us. We are doing our very, very best to create a tournament that is equitable and enjoyable and as less as possible, and anything we can do to contribute to that, we really want to do. We're really grateful for all of you, you know, in very, very different time zones, in very different regions with different internet connectivity and different stresses in your personal life that you're trying to balance. We're very much in awe of you for pushing through world. It was hard enough when it was in an exciting country that it was fun to visit with all of your friends around you. In online world adds a lot of stress. So, you know, from Kat looking at competitors and judges, it's so impressive. And I think the last thing I would do is a stress management tip to sort of build on something that Juanita was saying. If you explain debating in worlds to people who don't do debating, they'll tell you it's really impressive. I mean, they'll think you're nerdy, but they'll tell you it's really impressive because you are talking about a variety of different topics. You're making arguments about them and you're competing with the best people in the world, representing your institution, your country to do so. And I think we get so wrapped up in, you know, TAC rankings and speaker scores that you forget that from the outside looking in, people are less concerned about that, but the overall competing and doing well and being able to do this activity in the first place is very, very impressive to most people. So please let us know whatever we can do. We want to do it, and really best of luck for all of the future rounds.
Thank you so much to Bobbi, to Hadar, to Nolo, to Juanita, to Jess for joining us today. And one final thank you and some reminder. Speakers and judges are not the only people who are stressed and who are working hard to make this last 2 days possible and good. There are also ORCOM, there are also TAP team, there are also equity team, the language team, and all of the people. So please be nice today because everyone will be stressed. Everyone will be trying to do their best. So try to limit shit posting in the most important channels, try to listen to people, try to read the instructions before you are nudging with the questions, and just let's try to make this last in-round day as pleasant, as nice as possible, and respect other people's work, and just understanding that everyone can work under the stress, and we are all trying to do our best. So thank you so much to all of the panelists. Thank you so much, ORCOM, for facilitate this training. Today, the next part of the training will be after round 7. It will be debriefs. It will be briefing of round 7 motion and the briefing of the round 6 motion. So you can join Harish and Jason Xiao, which will be again streamed at our platform at Korea WUDC live stream, and the rest of the announcements, what you can expect from us for the next day, you can find on the training channel, or also on the announcement channel by the end of each day with some sort of preview what we are offering to you. Thank you so much. If you have questions, please shoot us on the training channel, and thank you for watching.